My mother-in-law tried to force me to sign over my house, but she didn't expect me to fight back. Dealing with in-laws is never easy, but my mother-in-law, she's in a league of her own. She's always had this way of making me feel like I wasn't good enough for her son. But I bit my tongue for the sake of keeping the peace. That is, until she crossed a line I couldn't ignore. She tried to force me to sign over the house my husband and I bought together, our home. What she didn't realize, though, was that I wasn't about to roll over and let her get away with it. From the moment I married my husband, Jake, his mom, Linda, made it clear she didn't think I was worthy of him. It was little things at first, backhanded compliments about my cooking, unsolicited advice about how to run a household, and constant comparisons to Jake's exes. I shrugged it off, thinking, she'll come around eventually. But as time went on, her meddling got worse. Jake and I bought a modest house a year into our marriage, and we were so proud of it. It wasn't huge or fancy, but it was ours. We both worked hard to save up for it, and signing those papers felt like a milestone. Linda, however, didn't see it that way. She thought the house was too far from family. Translation, too far from her. She also made snide comments about how I clearly wasn't contributing enough to the household since Jake earned more than I did. Jake defended me, but Linda wasn't one to let things go. One afternoon, she came over unannounced while Jake was at work. I was busy organizing some paperwork when she sat down at the kitchen table and said, "You know, this house should really belong to Jake. It's only fair considering he paid for most of it." I froze. "Linda, it's our house. We bought it together." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, honey, I'm not saying you don't contribute. I'm just saying it makes more sense for it to be in Jake's name only. You wouldn't want things to get messy, would you?" That was the first red flag. I tried to laugh it off, but deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. A few weeks after that conversation, Linda showed up again, this time with a folder in hand. She placed it on the kitchen table like she was about to close some big business deal. I could already tell I wasn't going to like where this was headed. "I've been thinking about what we talked about last time," she said, her tone overly sweet. "And I took the liberty of drafting up a little something that will make things simpler for everyone." Curious but wary, I opened the folder. Inside was a legal document, a quitclaim deed to be exact. It basically transferred ownership of the house entirely to Jake. I stared at her, stunned. "Are you serious right now?" "Of course," she said, as if she were doing me a favor. "This is for your protection too, dear. If anything were to happen, you wouldn't have to worry about all the financial responsibilities. It's the right thing to do." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Linda, this is my home too. Jake and I bought it together. Why would I sign this?" She leaned in, her tone dropping to something almost menacing. "Because it's what's best for the family. Trust me, this is how things should be." I was fuming, but I kept my cool. "I think I'll need to talk to Jake about this," I said, handing the folder back to her. "Oh, I wouldn't bother him with this," she replied quickly. "He has enough on his plate. Just sign it, and I'll take care of the rest." That was when I knew she wasn't just meddling. She was trying to manipulate me. But if she thought I was going to roll over, she had another thing coming. As soon as Linda left, I called Jake. I wasn't going to wait until he got home to deal with this. I needed his input now. When he picked up, I tried to keep my tone neutral, but the frustration bled through. "Your mom came over again," I said. He sighed. "What now?" "She brought a quitclaim deed," I said flatly. "She wants me to sign the house over to you." There was a pause. "Wait, what? She actually brought paperwork?" "Yep, she tried to frame it like it was for my own good. Said it was what's best for the family." I couldn't help the sarcasm creeping into my voice. Jake groaned. "I can't believe she did that. Look, I'll handle it. I'll talk to her and tell her to back off." I appreciated his support, but something about his tone made me hesitate. "Jake, this isn't just about her being overbearing. She's trying to take control of something that belongs to both of us. I need to know you're on my side here." "I am on your side," he said quickly. "You know I am, but you have to understand. She thinks she's protecting me. It's misguided, yeah, but she means well." "Jake, means well doesn't cut it when she's trying to manipulate me into signing away my rights to our house," I shot back. "You need to be firm with her." He sighed again, and I could tell he was torn. "I'll talk to her tonight," he promised. "I'll make it clear that this is non-negotiable." I wanted to believe him, but I had a sinking feeling that Linda wasn't going to back down that easily. Jake did talk to Linda that evening, but her response was exactly what I'd expected, stubborn and dismissive. When he came home, he looked frustrated but resigned. "She says she didn't mean to overstep," he told me, dropping his keys on the counter. "But she still thinks it's a good idea. I told her to let it go." "And do you think she's actually going to let it go?" I asked, crossing my arms. Jake hesitated, and that pause was all I needed to hear. "Look, she'll back off eventually," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "She just needs time to adjust." But Linda didn't back off. A week later, she showed up at the house again, unannounced, with a notary in tow. Yes, you heard that right, a notary. She marched into the living room like she owned the place, holding the same folder with the quitclaim deed. "I thought we could settle this today," she said, her tone cheerful but her eyes sharp. The notary, clearly unaware of the situation, stood awkwardly by the door, looking at me for direction. I was livid. "Linda, you need to leave, right now. Why are you being so difficult about this?" she snapped, dropping the fake sweetness. "This is for everyone's benefit, especially Jake's." "That's enough." Jake's voice cut through the room like a whip. He had just walked in and caught the tail end of the exchange. "Mom, you're out of line." She whirled around to face him, her expression a mix of shock and indignation. "I'm just trying to help," she said. "You're my son. I'm looking out for you." Jake shook his head, his jaw tight. "You're not helping. You're making things worse. This house belongs to both of us, and you have no right to interfere." For a moment, I thought she might back down, but then she turned to me, her eyes cold. "Fine," she said, "but don't come crying to me when this all falls apart." With that, she stormed out, dragging the confused notary behind her. It felt like a small victory, but I knew this wasn't over. After Linda's dramatic exit, things were quiet for a while. She didn't visit or call, and honestly, I was relieved. I thought maybe Jake's firm stance had finally gotten through to her. But then the passive-aggressive tactics started. It began with snide comments during family gatherings. "It's nice to see you two doing well," she'd say, her smile a little too tight. "I just hope you're making smart decisions with the house." Or, "Jake, don't forget to protect what's rightfully yours." Then came the unsolicited advice. She sent emails with links to articles about the dangers of joint ownership and mailed printed brochures about estate planning. At one point, she even left a book titled "How to Secure Your Assets on Our Front Porch." I couldn't decide whether to laugh or scream. Jake tried to brush it off, saying, "She's just being her usual self." But I was getting fed up. "Jake, this isn't harmless meddling," I told him. "She's undermining me, and us." "I know," he said with a sigh. "I'll talk to her again." But I wasn't convinced another conversation would do any good. Linda wasn't just overstepping. She was waging a silent war, and I knew I had to be ready for whatever she tried next. Linda's next move caught me completely off guard. One afternoon, I came home from work to find a letter from a lawyer in the mailbox. At first, I thought it was junk mail, but when I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a formal request to revisit ownership agreements for the house. The letter claimed that Linda was concerned about Jake's financial stability and wanted to ensure his interests were properly protected. She had actually hired a lawyer. When Jake got home, I shoved the letter into his hands. "This is beyond meddling, Jake. She's trying to take legal action now." He read the letter, his expression darkening with every line. "I can't believe she's doing this," he said, shaking his head. "She knows better." "Does she, though?" I shot back. "Because it seems like she thinks she can bulldoze her way into our lives and get whatever she wants." Jake agreed to call her immediately. The conversation was heated, with him demanding to know what she was thinking and her insisting she was only trying to protect him. "I'm not doing this to hurt anyone," she argued. "I'm doing this because I care about you." But Jake wasn't having it this time. "Mom, if you care about me, you'll stop, right now. Because if you keep pushing, you're going to lose both of us." Her response, "I just don't want to see you make a mistake you'll regret." And with that, she hung up. After that call, Jake and I knew we couldn't just wait for Linda to back off anymore. Her involvement had escalated from meddling to outright legal interference, and it was time to take action. "We need to make it clear to her, and anyone else she involves, that this is our life and our house," I told Jake. The first thing we did was contact a lawyer of our own. I brought the letter Linda's lawyer had sent, and after reading it, our attorney assured us that Linda had no legal standing to demand anything about our house. She's clearly overstepping, the lawyer said, but we can send a formal response to put an end to this nonsense. I felt a surge of relief knowing we had someone in our corner, but part of me still worried about how Linda would react. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about setting boundaries and making it clear that her behavior wouldn't be tolerated. A few days later, our lawyer sent a letter to Linda's attorney firmly stating that her attempts to interfere with our property were baseless and inappropriate. The letter also demanded that she cease all further attempts to involve herself in our financial affairs. When Linda received the letter, she called Jake in tears. "How could you do this to me?" she sobbed. "I'm your mother. I was only trying to help." "Mom, you crossed the line," Jake said firmly. "This isn't about helping. It's about control, and it stops now." For once, Linda didn't have a snarky comeback. She hung up without another word. After that phone call, Linda went radio silent. No visits, no texts, no emails, nothing. At first, it felt like a victory, like Jake and I had finally gotten through to her. But then the guilt started creeping in. Jake admitted he felt conflicted. "She's my mom," he said one night. "I hate that it came to this. I don't want to cut her out of my life, but I also can't let her keep walking all over us." I understood where he was coming from, but I didn't share his guilt. Linda had crossed so many boundaries, and honestly, I felt like she'd brought this on herself. "Jake, she needs to understand that there are consequences to her actions," I said. "You gave her every chance to back off, and she ignored you." Still, the silence from Linda made things feel unfinished. It was like the calm before a storm, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was planning something. That suspicion was confirmed a week later when we heard from Jake's sister, Rachel. "Mom's been venting to everyone," she said during a call. "She's telling the whole family that you two are ungrateful and that you're pushing her out of your lives." "Of course she is," I muttered under my breath. Jake just sighed. "What else is she saying?" he asked. "She's playing the victim," Rachel said, "saying she's only ever tried to help and that you're both turning your backs on her." Hearing that hurt Jake more than he let on, but it also strengthened his resolve. "We didn't turn our backs on her," he said. "She forced our hand." The fallout with Linda started to ripple through Jake's family. Relatives began reaching out, asking what was going on and why we were treating her so badly. It was clear Linda had been spinning her version of events, framing herself as the victim and us as the villains. Jake and I decided to get ahead of the narrative. We called a family meeting at our house and invited everyone, including Linda. She arrived with her usual air of self-righteousness, but I could tell she wasn't expecting what we had planned. Once everyone was seated, Jake took the lead. "We wanted to clear the air," he began. "There's been a lot of talk about what's been happening, and I think it's time we set the record straight." He explained everything: the quitclaim deed, the notary, the legal letter, and Linda's relentless attempts to undermine our marriage and ownership of the house. He kept his tone calm and factual, but his words carried weight. As he spoke, I could see some of the relatives shifting uncomfortably, clearly realizing they hadn't been told the full story. When he finished, Linda immediately jumped in. "I was only trying to protect you," she said, her voice rising. "This was about ensuring your future, Jake. And you thought the best way to do that was by cutting my wife out of the picture?" Jake shot back. "Mom, this isn't protection. It's control, and it has to stop." For once, Linda didn't have a snappy response. The room fell silent as everyone processed what had just been said. It was a turning point, not just for our relationship with Linda, but for how the rest of the family saw her behavior. After the meeting, the atmosphere with Jake's family shifted. While some relatives still felt caught in the middle, most of them started to see the bigger picture. A few even apologized for jumping to conclusions, realizing Linda hadn't been entirely honest about what had happened. As for Linda, she left the meeting in silence, her usual bravado replaced by something I hadn't seen before: vulnerability. Jake and I didn't hear from her for a couple of weeks after that, which gave us some much-needed breathing room. When she finally did reach out, it was through a short, carefully worded text. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. I hope we can move forward." It wasn't the grand apology I'd hoped for, but it was a start. Jake and I agreed to keep boundaries firm moving forward. We made it clear to Linda that while we weren't cutting her out of our lives, there would be no more meddling in our finances, our marriage, or our home. To my surprise, she seemed to respect those boundaries, at least for now. Family gatherings became less tense, and while our relationship with her wasn't perfect, it was manageable. More importantly, Jake and I came out of this stronger as a couple. We'd faced one of the toughest challenges of our marriage and come out the other side more united than ever. This experience taught me the importance of setting boundaries, even with family. Sometimes people we love overstep, and it's okay to stand your ground. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you value yourself and your relationships enough to protect them. Have you ever dealt with a meddling family member or had to set firm boundaries? How did it go? Share your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear how others have navigated similar challenges. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more real-life tales of love, family, and resilience. Thanks for watching.